2025, Mike, will be the last year that Jon Jones fights in the UFC, if we're lucky.
I don't think that's an overreaction. I think that's probably pretty on point. The only thing that I really see maybe delaying that is if he suffers another injury or has another personal issue that could delay.
Yeah, this is all in a vacuum. Nothing bad outside the cage happens. This is the last year we see Jon.
For sure. And I guess the only other handicap I'd put on it is if he does fight Tom Aspinall, is he winning or losing that fight? Because if he loses, I couldn't imagine how lucrative a potential rematch would be, whether he wants to do it or not. And then maybe if he wins, you talk about a trilogy. I know we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, like to count 3 Jon Jones fights. We're kind of hoping for just 1 at this point. But if he wins, most definitely, I can't see him extending it beyond. I think he would ride off on that high, especially if he gets his FU money that he said he wanted from the UFC. So yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment, just given the lay of the land. But yeah, if we're talking about maybe a loss, I think that could extend it. What would the UFC do to keep him around? All those things. But right now, it does feel like we're just setting ourselves up for one finale here.
Do you think? Yeah. Do you think though? It's interesting because I didn't really think about Jon coming back if he lost to Aspinall. You really think Jon would fight one more time if he did lose to Aspinall?
Well, let me flip it on you, Simon. Do you think Jon Jones's ego would allow him to walk away on a loss? I mean, of course, it would depend on if Tom Aspinall humiliated him and like it was completely dominant. Maybe he just said, "I'm past my time. You know, I had some great years. I got this last payday. All good." But I think if even 1% of him felt like he could have done something different or something went wrong this way or the other thing, then I don't know if his ego could allow him to walk away on a loss.
Yeah, I know he's got the massive ego, man, but I feel like what we've been hearing from Jon, I want to believe that he's like a more mature guy, kind of realizes where he's at in his career. Like if he goes and steps in the cage, and let's just say worst case scenario, he got blitzed in some way and, you know, got finished by Aspinall. Is that, I don't know, do you really come back from that outcome? Maybe you come back from a 5-round Alex Gustafsson type war, you know, that you lose and you're like, maybe, you know, something like that. That would set up a big rematch, but would a finish? And it's really weird for me to say Jon Jones being finished. I realize that sounds hilarious, and people in the comments are going to skewer me for even suggesting it. But I don't know. Tom Aspinall is a serious threat. If we got that conclusion, does he come back?
I mean, if Tom Aspinall beat him in the way he's been beating guys, like a minute or two, I mean, we don't even know if Tom Aspinall is capable of a 5-round war. We haven't seen anything like that from him. But I don't know. Like, again, it really depends on how Jon would justify things for himself. Like you mentioned that Gustafsson fight, he always knew, like, even though at the time and for many years, that was his closest fight to being a loss up until like the Gustafsson or the Thiago Santos and Dominic Reyes fights. But he'd always say like, you know, was partying up until the weekend before, barely trained, did this. So I think he knew like, I'm a lot better this guy. I beat him without really training at all. If he got knocked out in a minute or two by Tom Aspinall, I feel like he would tell himself like, oh, it's heavyweight, I just got caught, like something like that. I'm still better than him, but it like went on early. If he lost a dominant 5-round decision, maybe that would be the scenario that like isn't close. He's losing in every element. He can't handle Tom's speed on the feet. He can't handle his jiu-jitsu on the ground. It all sounds absurd to kind of say that about Jon Jones, but we're hypothesizing here. So I do think there is scenarios where maybe he would be content walking away and passing the torch, quote unquote. But I do think there's more scenarios where he would be like, nah, like this didn't go right for some reason. I mean, you just look at this past weekend, like Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, like all the things Tyson Fury was saying after that first fight, it was hard for him to comprehend. And then he loses again, and now he's like kind of in this spot. So I feel like it might take 2 losses for Jon Jones to the same guy to be fully accepting of maybe the reality he's not that man anymore.
Interesting. Okay, well, let me touch on the if we're lucky portion of my overreaction there. Play a little devil's advocate here with you, Mike. What if Jon Jones doesn't fight in 2025? Is it possible that he's done? Is it possible that, as I have said before on this program, negotiations go completely sideways with the UFC and with Dana White, and he just walks away on top after beating the greatest heavyweight of all time in Stipe? What do you think of that? Like, I guess, well, let me ask you this. What do you make of the guarantee from Dana White?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the two things, the Dana White thing, that shows a certain level of boldness and confidence that we don't really hear from him. So you wonder if things are maybe already down the line. Maybe they got a verbal agreement or something tentative in place that allowed Dana to display that confidence. So that was kind of my read into that. I think that's a very, very positive sign of where things are going.
You didn't think of it as posturing in some way?
Posturing for who, though? Like, I guess it would just be the fans. Like, we already know that they want this fight. We know Tom wants this fight. We know Jones is kind of, lukewarm to be kind about it. So I just don't know who it's benefiting for him to come out and say that. And if it was completely untrue, like, we haven't heard Jon come out and say,
right,
that's ridiculous. Like, why are you saying 100%? We're still super far away. So
still to come.
Yeah, my thought on that. But to your first part, like, would he be willing to walk away? I think he would if things didn't go well. I mean, he said as much to us at the post-fight press conference in New York. He was like, if I don't get what I want, like if my last moment is knocking out Stipe Miocic in front of President Trump in my home state in this arena headlining Madison Square Garden, like this is a pretty nice way to ride off. And he is completely right about that. In a nutshell, that is a great moment, a lot of memories. You can, tell whoever about my final fight. So I do think he would be willing, and he's shown a willingness to step aside for years on end. I don't think he has that luxury at this point in his life to do something like that. So I do think we would be lucky element, like if he's gonna go, I think he would be fine with his decision to do so, and we'll find out, I think, in the coming months whether that's going to happen or not.
Okay, and then the last thing I just want to touch on related to Jon going to 2025. Obviously, he was very vocal leading up to 309 that his wish was Alex Pereira. What would you say the chances are that somehow that ends up being his one fight in 2025?
It feels minimal at this point. Like if I had to put a percentage, maybe like 10%. I don't know. Just because I feel like, Alex Pereira, from all signs, I don't know what he's hinting at, saying not Ankalaev. As far as his next fight. So I don't know what they're going to do with him. That should be the fight, and no guarantees he wins that. So if he loses, that derails the entire thing. Pereira's got to keep winning. You could make an argument some of his tougher fights in the division could be coming up. And then, like Jon is obviously, this is the fight they want for him. So it would feel like someone would have to go pretty quirky for them to do that fight.
Okay. All right, man. Okay. Well, that's what we'll see. We'll see what happens with Jon Jones. See if we're lucky if we get him one time. There is a scenario that Mike thinks we could get him twice. So we'll see how this thing plays out with Jones.
MMA Junkie AI.